Everybody, my name is McKay Allen, as I said a moment ago, and I'm with LogMyCalls, and we're really excited you're here today. This webinar is a joint effort between KeyMotive and LogMyCalls. KeyMotive actually offers call tracking at a really great rate and with a lot of features through LogMyCalls. And so we're really excited KeyMotive has joined us today. They have a significant amount of expertise in the marketing world for tires, and so we're excited that they're here, and we're excited to welcome you all here today as well. Here's what we'll do today, gang. We're going to start into the presentation after a brief introduction, and the presentation's on a few things you're going to be missing without call tracking if you're not getting that data. And at the end of the webinar, we'll take a few questions if you want to ask any, and we'll also turn some time over to KeyMotive at the conclusion for them to introduce us a little bit to their company and how you can get in touch with them. So with that, a brief introduction. First of all, some house cleaning items. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, just type those into the question bar, the chat bar, and we'll address those at the conclusion. And the questions can be anything about marketing or call tracking or KeyMotive or LogMyCalls or anything you want. So just ask those questions. Second, we have a lot of different types of businesses on the phone today. We have some 1 to 2 location tire businesses. We also have some multi-location businesses on the phone today. So hopefully this helps you both analyze the value of call tracking for your business. And then finally, the way that the presentation itself will go is I'll be running through a few of the slides. But as I said, if you have questions, ask those, and then KeyMotive, if they have anything to say, they'll be sure to ask those. I did want to briefly introduce KeyMotive. They're a fantastic marketing company that we've worked with for several months now, I believe, and they do a really good job in the industry. They work with some of the biggest players in the industry as well as some small businesses and 1 or 2 location businesses. They do a wonderful job, and they really can help you with your marketing. And you know they're not scared of being measured and being held accountable because they offer call tracking. So they want you to know how well you're doing for them, which is a good sign. So we're excited that Jerry Tarassi and Scott Holden have joined us today from KeyMotive. Guys, anything to say at the outset at all?
No, I'm excited to be here and excited to be partnering with LogMyCalls to offer call tracking for the automotive and tire industry.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So with that, why don't we get started? This webinar is being recorded, so if you have any questions, they'll be recorded as well. And afterwards, we'll make this recording available to you. So why don't we get started? The presentation today shouldn't last more than 20 or 30 minutes, and we'll have some time for some questions if you have any. So let's get going. First, let's talk about a little bit about what call tracking is, who LogMyCalls is, how we work with KeyMotive, all that good stuff. So first of all, call tracking allows marketers, allows businesses to track which marketing campaigns, which efforts, etc. are producing phone calls and which are not. So LogMyCalls provides call tracking and call recording for the industry, and we work with hundreds of locations throughout the tire and automotive space. Some very big businesses, some small businesses, everything in between. So we know the industry well. This guy is our mascot, and recently we won a very big, exciting award from Amazon. 2,500 companies worldwide competed. We won the thing. And so that's pretty exciting for a company that specializes in marketing data for the tire and automotive industry. So how does call tracking help the tire industry specifically? I want to go through these briefly. Well, the majority of businesses in the industry use call tracking because call tracking stops them from wasting money on marketing that doesn't work. So that's important, obviously. We tell them which campaigns, sources, etc. are producing phone calls so they can therefore, oh, you know what? I don't think my slides are showing. That's my fault, gang. I'm sorry about that. Ha! All right, perfect. I actually had forgotten to show my screen. Okay, well, this is the first slide I was on when I was explaining the Amazon thing, so you can see that now clearly. And I do want to give you a little bit of background of how we work with KeyMotive. So KeyMotive, as they said, as Jerry said, is a marketing company. We provide marketing for the tire and automotive industries. But they weren't afraid of being held accountable for their marketing activities. They want you to know how many phone calls they're producing for you. And so they actually offer call tracking, a service they call Engage, that allows you to log in and see how many calls KeyMotive Marketing is generating for you. That's incredible. A lot of marketing companies don't offer that, and they do. So that's awesome. So let's go through this again now that you can actually see what I'm talking about. So businesses use call tracking because it stops them from wasting money on marketing that doesn't work. So for example, if you put a call tracking phone number on your website and it's generating 500 calls in a month or a week or whatever, and then you send a direct mail piece that only generates 40, well, which one are you going to spend your money on in the future? The same thing can be true vice versa, of course. They also use us because we provide call recordings, so they can actually log in, listen to their employees on the phone, hear how well they're actually handling business on the phone. And then finally, they actually use us to provide data about close rates. So for example, if someone calls in and maybe they're price shopping around a few different businesses for tires, what is the percentage of time that someone calls in versus the percentage of time they actually book an appointment or say they'll come in at a certain time? What is that percentage? Because of call recording, you can actually analyze that percentage and know your close rate on the phone. Employees will have different close rates. Different products will have different close rates. It's pretty interesting data, actually. So companies ultimately in the industry use call tracking because they make money and save money through call tracking. So how does the industry use it specifically? First, they use call tracking to measure online marketing. So they will put call tracking numbers on their website. They'll measure campaigns. They'll measure which ads are working. They'll even measure which keywords are producing phone calls. And a lot of people in the industry use us as a call recording solution. So they will use Engage through KeyMotive as a way to listen to their employees on the phone. So maybe this marketing data, even though it's super important, maybe it isn't as important to a very small one-location or two-location business. However, it would be very important in that scenario to listen to employees on the phone to see if they're handling business well on the phone. Because each call could potentially be worth several $100s, so we don't want to lose any calls. And then they also will use the tool to score calls to actually determine which employees are performing well on the phone and which aren't. Now, this is an interesting statistic to kind of frame our discussion today. This is according to a third-party data service called BIA-Kelsey. They determined that in 2012, about $70 billion almost were spent on advertising to drive phone calls. That's a lot of money. And that number is only going to increase. Phone calls are actually, according to BIA-Kelsey, going to become more important, not less. And the reason is because we've all got these little smartphones now. And if you conduct a search on a smartphone, a Google search, for example, you're going to have a bunch of results that come up with phone numbers. Those numbers are simply tappable with your little thumb. You can call the business directly. And so that means the number of calls is going to go up. BIA-Kelsey even goes so far as to say that, for example, if you're receiving 20 calls a day now, they say by the end of 2014, you could be receiving 35 to 40 phone calls a day, simply because of this mobile search, this mobile smartphone Googling that is happening. So if you're saying phone calls aren't that important, well, they are, and they're going to get more important. So let's talk about the 5 things you're missing without call tracking. First, you're going to miss marketing data. You're also going to miss metrics that can improve your marketing. You're going to miss call recording. And then you're going to miss things that could improve your phone sales. And ultimately, you're going to miss a lot of customer data. So I want to delve into these 5 things individually. First, in terms of marketing data, most businesses do not know how customers find them. They simply don't have the data. And so the question, I guess I would ask is, if you don't know how customers are finding you, how on earth are you supposed to market more effectively? You can't, because you don't know what's working and what isn't. So if you didn't have the data about how many phone calls your website was generating versus how many phone calls your Yellow Pages listing was generating versus how many phone calls your direct mail campaign or your local radio ads were generating, how are you supposed to know where to spend your money next quarter or next year? You can't. It's not possible. So most SMBs don't know how many visitors their website generates. They don't know how many phone calls their website generates, and they don't know how many phone calls their other tactics, their direct mail, if they're doing some PPC or some local directories. They don't know how many phone calls those things generate. And so they're making, and it's not their fault that they're making these poor decisions. It's the data's fault. They don't have the data, and so they're therefore making poor decisions in their marketing. So call tracking can provide the raw number of phone calls each of those sources generate. It can provide the keywords that were searched before those calls were made. It can even provide the length of calls, the call recordings themselves, as well as marketing data about specific campaigns, sources, all that stuff. So that's what call tracking can provide. Now this is a kind of a very pretty screenshot, actually, of the way that the KeyMotive call tracking service works and the way it looks. So if you log into the KeyMotive call tracking solution, you're going to see this. You're going to see KeyMotive powered by LogMyCalls. You're going to be able to log in here, listen to your calls, track your marketing. So this is an example of the track page. You can see by specific date range the total number of calls that were received. You can see each individual phone number is going to be associated with a different campaign. So maybe you have one phone number associated with your radio ad, another with your PPC ads, another with your mobile ads, another with your website. You're going to be able to see very clearly as you click on one box or another which of these is producing calls and which is not. It's an invaluable resource for measuring your marketing. And again, this is all available through KeyMotive, so it's awesome. So this gives you more data. More data means more optimization, which means more money. Because think about it, if you are, well, I'll give you an example, sort of a story real quick. We started working with a tire company who was spending about $12,000 a year on Yellow Pages ads. So they had like the back page ad, they had a couple big pull-out ads in the middle of the phone book. And after about 3 months, the number of calls that this ad tactic had produced for them was 3. So if you $12,000 a year is $1,000 a month, 1 call a month, 1 call, $1,000, that's not a very good return on investment. Whereas his online marketing tactics, he was producing about 1 call for every $40 to $50 he spent. So you can see very clearly how optimization would have helped him sooner. He had been doing this for years and years, and he's like, I don't have any clue how much money I wasted. But long story short, he was able to make more money because he was wasting less money on his marketing because he was using call tracking. So let's talk about some metrics to improve marketing specifically. This is a client of ours called Gerald's Tires. They have 6 locations in South Carolina. They started using call tracking several months ago. And what they did was they put a local phone number. We can get local numbers in any rate center in the U.S. Put a local phone number on their website because they wanted to track how many phone calls their website was producing. So now before they did this, they didn't really market their website. They didn't invest in their website a lot. And they didn't really track their website's effectiveness very much. So their assumptions were, going into this, that their website was only generating about 150 phone calls a month. And their assumption, again, was that most of their business came from local Yellow Page ads and word of mouth. So that was their assumption. However, when they started using call tracking, they determined their website was actually generating about 300 to 400 phone calls a month, so more than they thought. And their local Yellow Page ads were only generating about 8 to 10 calls a month. That was their situation. Your market might be different. That's why you have to test it. But in their situation, that was the case. So what did they do? And this is the key. Data is not great unless you do something with it. So they placed local phone numbers on their website, local call tracking numbers. They spent some money to redesign their site, and they began doing some very basic online marketing. They weren't spending a ton of money, but they started doing some basic stuff. And here's the result. Pretty staggering. Month 1, their website generated 400 phone calls. Month 2, after a few of those marketing tactics were implemented, the website generated 1,489 phone calls. By month 3, the website was generating over 2,500 phone calls a month. Obviously, their revenue increased substantially as the number of calls increased. So you're talking about 5, 6, 7 times increases with phone calls coming from their website. That's incredibly powerful stuff right there. And they wouldn't have known about the data were they not tracking calls. Now, we're not a marketing company, right? We're not taking credit for this, for the increase. What we'll take credit for is the data. KeyMotive can help you generate more calls. The call tracking end of it can help you show how many calls you're actually generating. Now, call recordings. Some people kind of get uncomfortable when they hear call recording. Call recording is perfectly legal. You don't even need to notify customers you're doing it in most states. In about 13 states you do. Just have a little blip that says this call may be recorded. But in most states, you don't even need to have that. So call recordings can tell you what your employees sound like. Are they polite? Do they sound rushed or stressed or annoyed when they answer the phone? And this is actually kind of a problem, to be frank, in the automotive and tire industries, and here's why. You've got people answering the phone that are trying to do about 7 things at once in most cases. They're running in and out from the bays. They're talking to customers at a front desk of some sort. They may be in a tire shop. They may be in a showroom talking to somebody about a tire that's up on a rack. And then the phone rings. Well, they're stressed. They're in the middle of about 7 things. And sometimes they sound stressed when the phone rings. They sound rushed. They even sound annoyed in many cases. You'd be stunned if you listen to the phone calls in your business, I promise you, at what the customer hears when they call. And keep in mind, every single phone call could be worth a brand new set of tires for a pickup, which could be $500, $600, $700, $800, or a brand new set of tires for a car, which could be $400+. So every single phone call has that potential value, so they can't be wasted. You're spending money as the owner or manager of the business to get the phone to ring. You're spending money, so don't make sure that phone calls are not ignored or not treated lightly. This is where in LogMyCalls via the KeyMotive call tracking portal that you can actually go in and listen to the calls. You just simply click on this little listen page. You sort by the dates you want, the tracking numbers you want to listen to. Just click the little play button, and boom, your call starts playing, and you can hear it. You can email it to people. You can download it to your machine. You can even add comments to it that will give the employee who answered the phone maybe some direction on how to improve the next time. If you don't want to confront Jim on how he did on the phone in person, you can just write a comment and say, Jim, you sounded rushed or annoyed or stressed, and Jim will improve the next time, hopefully. Now, let's talk about some very specific tactics to improve phone sales. This is important stuff. So one of the things, and I'll actually go back and show this to you. So you notice the listen page here. The score page actually allows you to create a scorecard. Maybe it's 5 criteria, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20. Was the greeting good, yes or no? Did they specifically and clearly state the name of the business on the phone? And that's important, actually. Sometimes we hear in the industry, people will get on the phone, today, and they're very quick. It's quick. People calling can't even hardly understand it because they're so rushed. That's an element of a scorecard, maybe. Another element is, did they ask specifically for them to come in at a certain time? You know, we've got an opening at 2 or at 3. Why don't you come in at one of those times? Can you do that? Yeah, I'll come in. There's all these elements of the scorecard that are important, and the most important, did the caller agree to come in at a certain time? Those things can be scored and measured and actually quantified. So we started scoring phone calls for a tire business several months ago. They implemented a little internal program to increase their close rates. So they wanted to increase the percentage of appointments that resulted from phone calls. And what they did, they didn't hire some expensive sales trainer or anything. What they did was they actually just listened to calls in meetings. They talked about things internally about how to improve, and they would actually listen to the worst calls of the week together as a group. So if somebody has a terrible call and they're rude and they're rushed and they're annoyed, they are actually going to have that call played in front of every employee. They actually even started structuring bonuses and raises around call scores. Just a couple of ideas. Well, here's what happened. In month 1, when we first started measuring close rates, 13% was the close rate, meaning 13% of the people who called said verbally on the phone they would end up coming in. They would come in at a specific time to have to get new tires or have the car looked at. Once they started measuring things, things improved. By month 5, the close rate was 70%. That means 7 out of 10 times that the phone rang, the person said verbally they would come in at a specific time. That means the call didn't end with, well, let me call around a little bit and I'll get back to you, which is how too many calls in the industry end right now. So do you think the revenue increased when this number went up? Absolutely. Now, the point I'll make is, did all of these 70% people actually that said they were going to come in, did they come in at that time? Of course not. But you can bet more of them did than when the close rate was 13%. The revenue tripled during this time period, tripled. So the question I guess I would ask each of you is what if you could convert one more phone call a week, just one, to an appointment, to a specific them saying, yes, I'll come in at 2 o'clock and have my tires looked at? What would that do to your revenue? Here's a couple of data points about ways you can actually improve your close rates on the phone. These are statistically proven data points. We partnered with a couple of universities here to actually analyze this data, and here are some of the findings. So when an employee uses the caller's name on the initial conversation, the caller is actually 2.5 times more likely to come in and visit you. So actually, when they say, hey, who's calling? What's your name? My name's John. Okay, John, well, let me talk to you about some of the tires we have to offer, whatever. When the name is used, 2.5 times more likely. When the employee asks for the business, the caller is 4.4 times more likely to visit you. This is huge. Too many times on calls we hear, so how many times have you heard this call, right? Phone rings, customer says, hey, wonder what you had for tires for this size. Well, we've got this and this. Okay, what are the prices on those? Well, they're $385 out the door and $516 out the door. Okay, all right, thanks. I think I'm going to call around a little bit. All right, see you later. That's the majority of calls in the industry that we hear. But rarely do we hear, even though it's incredibly important, do we hear the, well, hey, why don't you come in 2 o'clock, we've got an opening, we'll just take a look, see what's a good fit for you. Will you do that? Yeah, sure. Or we've got an opening at 2 and at 4, which one's better for you? If you do, just that asking the question just makes it more likely. And then the most important thing is persistence. So if someone's like, no, I don't want to come in, just asking the question one more time actually increases the chances of a sale. So there's a lot of things you can do on the phone that will improve your ability to close business and to book appointments. These are 3 of the most important things. So don't worry about taking notes on this stuff. We'll email you the call record or the webinar recording, so you'll have that. And again, the point I want to stress is that if you get call tracking through KeyMotive, you can actually listen to these calls and determine if your employees are doing this stuff. Because right now, you know, how are you going to know if they're doing this stuff on a consistent basis? And then, of course, finally, customer data. This is kind of an unsung hero in the call recording world because you can actually hear. You don't have to guess. You can actually hear what your customers are asking about. So are they asking about a specific kind of tire? Are they asking about a specific brand more than other brands? Are they asking about a specific type of vehicle? And are they mentioning your competitors by name? Are they mentioning specific ones they're going to call? Well, I'm going to call this other tire place across town. Are they mentioning those by name? You know who you're competing against. That's valuable. And then the most important element is how important is price to them. You can get a very clear sense once you listen to 10 calls, 20 calls, listen to 5, 6, 7, 10 calls a week, you get a very clear sense of how important price is to your customers in your market. And you'll know better how to sell to them. If price isn't important, you can sell differently than if it is super important. Or if price is important, you can determine how to build a value so price isn't as important in the future. So they're not so concerned about price and they're more concerned about the quality of the tire and the customer service you guys are going to provide. All this stuff can be available through call tracking. So to conclude, I just want to recap a little bit. Call tracking can do, I think, 4 really important things for your business. And I know this because it's working in the tire industry. We're signing up clients in the tire industry literally every day. First is it's going to provide you data about which marketing efforts are producing phone calls. So if you don't have that data, it's going to be very difficult to market with more efficiency than you're marketing now because you're not going to know which areas are producing phone calls and which aren't. Second, it's going to provide you with a very, very cheap call recording solution. You don't have to get a new phone system. You don't have to get some expensive call recording device. Simply, this is going to give you data. Excuse me. This is going to give you call recording data. Simply log in, listen to the call. Third, you're actually going to receive the ability to score calls. So you're going to be able to measure employee performance. You're going to have a percentage associated with each call, a grade, if you will. So 81% for Jim's call versus 63% for Susie's call. Well, you know over a 2 or 3 month period of those scores, you know who's better on the phone. You know who should answer the phone more and who shouldn't. And then finally, you're going to get data about close rates, and that's important stuff. So what percentage of time are callers actually saying, yes, I'll come in and get some tires from you? That's important data. So all this all this stuff is available to you through call tracking. So with that, I want to turn it over to KeyMotive, talk a little bit about their business, what they do, and how it works, and how they use call tracking with their clients. So with that, I think, Scott, go ahead, sir.
Thanks, McKay. And on behalf of KeyMotive, I'd like to thank everybody who came in today and listened to it. I think McKay did a great job. Our clients have been using a program like this for some time, and I've listened to literally hundreds of phone calls. And there are leads in those calls. And you have to ask yourself, if there's an extra tire or maintenance or repair invoice that comes out of this program as a result of the program, it pays for itself right there alone. An extra 2 or 3 or 4 invoices per month. McKay mentioned call recording. Recording leads to training. Is your staff asking for the business? Are they asking for the customer contact info so they can follow up on the business after the fact? And then McKay talked about the yellow pages. Dealers employ a handful, maybe even a dozen marketing channels or vendors to retain or attract new business. Wouldn't you like to know which really works so you can narrow your marketing strategy down and potentially increase the return on your investment by narrowing that down just to a handful of marketing channels or vendors? So why should you use us? We've got no long-term contracts. We've got a lot of experience in the tire and service space. We pride ourselves on our customer service, flexibility in dealing with our team. Our data hygiene and analysis is second to none in my personal opinion. I'm a little bit biased. But we'd like to offer this program to you all. Enroll today, you'd get the introductory pricing. We'd also like to offer you, if you come on board with a 6-month commitment, we'd give you a month complimentary. So you get 6 months worth of service paying for 5 months. So I really appreciate all of you coming in and listening. I think, McKay, again, I appreciate you doing this for us and teaming up with us on this program. It's been a great program. And believe me, there are leads in those calls.
Awesome. Scott, thank you for that. And thank you guys for helping us with this. KeyMotive has been a great partner for us in the last several months, and we're excited to work with them. As I said, it says a lot about a marketing company when they're not afraid of the data, right? There's some marketing companies that you work with that they don't want you to know how many calls you're getting because that may reflect poorly on them. KeyMotive is not afraid of that data, which says a lot about the confidence they have in their ability to drive calls, but then also their ability to improve because, of course, they use this data too. I mean, if they see that maybe your calls are down, they may help. They may change some tactics on them from a marketing perspective. So they do a really good job. If there's no, it looks like we've got a couple of questions actually that I want to take. First question, good question. How do we? So he says, how do we go about signing up for call tracking through KeyMotive? I'll answer this, Scott, and then if I'm wrong, you take over. The best way would, I think, just be to call KeyMotive and say, hey, look, if you're a KeyMotive customer already, just let's get you signed up with call tracking. If you're not a KeyMotive customer, start working with those guys and sign up with their call tracking. Would that be the best course of action, Scott, to get signed up?
You hit it right on the head. Jerry and I have recognized a couple names out there, so again, we appreciate you coming on board. Just contact us directly. Of course, we've got some contact information right down there at the bottom as well. Feel free to use that, but reach out to us directly as well. Great.
And then the other question about call tracking is one we get a lot. This is a good question. It's, do I have to change the number on my website? Good question. The answer is yes and no. So you don't have to change your business number that you've had for 1,000 years. I mean, that's your business's phone number, the phone number your wife calls when she wants to reach you at the shop and all that stuff. That's not a problem. What we do recommend is a feature that is called dynamic number insertion. So what that does is it actually sort of automatically and dynamically changes the phone number that appears on your site depending on how someone visits your site. So if someone does a Google search, they would actually see a different phone number than someone who just visits your site directly. That allows our system to tell how many phone calls each source is producing. Now, the next question is naturally, well, won't that confuse people if they see a different phone number? There's two answers to that. The first is anecdotally. Personally, I don't remember one business's phone number. like literally one. With smartphones these days, I couldn't tell you my brother's phone number. I couldn't tell you. I know my wife's phone number off the top of my head and my parents' phone number. That's about it. So phone numbers, people don't care what your phone number is. And then second, the data, not anecdotally, but data that has been published in the New York Times and in a variety of other places shows that people will call whatever number they see. So it really doesn't matter what number you display on the page. It's a matter of getting marketing information. So
yeah, McKay, let me jump in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just briefly, I couldn't concur more. Most people are doing a search or trying to find your business via mobile. So they're going to start with Google Maps or a Google search. They might use Yelp. They might use your website. They might use a Goodyear, Firestone, or independent store locator. Whatever number is listed in that search function, they will, with their smartphone, just tap on that number and it's going to call your shop, or it's going to dial through to that number. They won't know whether 4 different numbers are different numbers.
Yep.
It's just it's a society that we live in these days, and it makes it easier to track then what sources are really driving your market.
Yeah, totally.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. This is Jerry Teresi, and we're not, like McKay said, we're not changing your phone number. It's a number that gets inserted. It gets forwarded to your phone number, so you never lose your phone number. You're not changing your phone number. It's when they call this tracking number, it automatically forwards to the number that you wanted it forwarded to. So it'll ring. The customer will not know that it's a different phone number. The person calling will not know that it's a different phone number that it's getting forwarded or anything like that. It's just going to go right to the number that you want it to go to. So there's no, changing the phone number. Am I going to lose my phone number? No, you're not going to lose your phone number, anything like that. And I want to mention a couple of things back into the presentation as far as the data. Being that we would get your, if you're a customer of ours doing other database marketing programs with us, is we're getting your customer data. And then what happens is when somebody calls, we can track that call back to the invoice as well. And that's not a perfect match because we're going to be matching on the caller ID. I don't know if you noticed on one of those screens that you got the caller ID where the call was coming from, the tracking number that was called, and then the number that the call was forwarded to. So yeah, that one right there. Yeah, you just passed it.
Yeah, I'll go back to the first one there.
So
there we go.
We're not getting rid of a phone number, like I said, so we can match if they called from the number that's on the invoice. We can track that back to the invoice and actually tell how much someone is spending through a call that was made where we're tracking. The scorecard, go back to that as well. The scorecard that we have set up is about 10 questions that we're actually looking at when someone answers the phone. Again, like McKay said, are they asking for the person's name? Are they being clear on who they're, when they're picking up the phone, ABC Tire, this is John. Are they being clear? Are they, what's their demeanor like on the phone? Are they asking for the business? Those are all questions that get asked in the scorecard to determine how well the person did on the phone and how we can make that person better. Different programs, different options for, the call program, for the engage program. It depends on how much you want to spend and how many numbers you want. You want just the call recordings and the phone number. We can score for you. We can do training. We can do coach calls. Once a quarter, we listen to phone calls and give you input on, get everybody on the phone and do a conference call and do some coaching. So there's a lot of things depending on if you want one phone number on the website or you want a phone number on the website, a phone number on your direct marketing, a phone number on Google. So there's different ways and different budgets that this all can be applied to. One of the things about listening to phone calls, as Scott said, he listens to some of these phone calls, and I do as well. What can I learn talking to the dealers, the customers on the phone calls that I listen to? And some of the main things that I have found is that they're not asking for the business.
Yeah.
I've listened to, I don't know how many calls I've listened to. No, I don't have those tires. And then you hear silence. The customer calling says, well, can you get those tires? Yeah, my warehouse has them. and you hear silence. And then you hear, again, the customer calling. A couple of days, no, I have them at my warehouse. I can have them to you tomorrow. So instead of saying, no, I don't have those tires, my warehouse has them. I can have them here in the morning. I've got an opening at 10 and at 2. Which time works for you better? And I can get you in. They're not asking for the sale. They're not asking for the appointment. And that's one of the biggest things that's a common denominator in the number of calls that I've listened to. So we're trying to help the dealers, trying to help you become stronger, to close more sales, to get that bottom line revenue up. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there in the automotive service industry. You know that. They're popping up all over. You've probably got a competitor down the road. And how are you going to differentiate yourself from that competitor down the road?
That's great, Jerry. That's great advice. We've got a couple more questions. There's two really good questions here. A lot of good questions. So this one's from Robert. He says, you mentioned call recording is legal in most cases. What's the case in Pennsylvania specifically? And then what are federal laws regarding that? So here's the deal with call recording, and I'll look up Pennsylvania. I'll throw Wikipedia up here, and we can look. The source of all knowledge in humanity, Wikipedia. So here's the deal with call recording. Call recording is governed by what are called one-party and two-party consent laws. So here's what that means. One-party consent means that just one person on the phone call needs to know it's recorded, i.e. your employee. So if your employee knows it's being recorded, that's sufficient in about 36 states, I believe. And those states are predominantly sort of in the middle of America. The coasts are a little more firm on call recording. So in the middle of America typically, and I'll look up state by state, and you know what, Robert, I'll send you Pennsylvania information after the webinar's over. But in most states, all you need to know is the employee needs to know the call is being recorded. You don't even need to have that little "this call may be recorded" disclaimer. In 14 states, there are what are called two-party consent laws, meaning that both parties on the phone, i.e. the employee and the caller, need to know the call is being recorded. And all that means is that there needs to be the little 2-second blurb, "This call may be recorded for quality and training purposes," or whatever. And we have some of those pre-recorded on LogMyCalls, so you can just go into the setup area, click that you want that recording to, that notification to play for about 2 seconds, and then it plays. And so that's the call recording rule right there. So as long as they're notified in the two-party states, it's legal, and in the other states, as long as your employees are notified, it's perfectly legal. So that's the question to that. So and let me know, Robert, if that doesn't answer your question sufficiently. Daniel asks a good question. He says, who established these different numbers for use for different media for your tracking? And then Brad asked sort of a follow-up question to that. He says, if you have a couple of ads for promotion like print, website, radio, etc., how do you track all of them? So I think this is sort of the same question. The way you would do that is you would put different tracking numbers on each of those channels. So you would actually put different local numbers, for example, on your direct mail pieces than you would on your website. You would put a different phone number associated in your radio ad than you would from your direct mail campaigns or with your local phone book. So you just simply use different numbers in all of those places, and you're able to track which of those is producing phone calls and which isn't. Now, as who determines that, I think to Daniel's question, that depends. I mean, if you're running your own marketing or a substantial portion of your own marketing, you just go into LogMyCalls, get a number for $3, and throw it on your direct mail piece. If you're working for KeyMotive or working with KeyMotive, excuse me, I'm sure they would help you. I'm not. Tell me how that works with you guys, Scott. How do you work out which numbers go where with your clients?
Jerry, you set that up in the past.
Yeah, we manage the phone numbers for you. We work with LogMyCalls to get phone numbers for you. Then we will give you the phone numbers. You just tell us where you want them pointed to, and we'll point them to you. As McKay said, they're all local numbers. They're all in those. Not going to be a long-distance number for somebody calling that particular location if you have multiple locations. So they're all going to be local numbers. If you're looking for a specific number, that might be a little more difficult to find because there are only so many phone numbers to be had for certain, cell phone numbers are only certain bank of phone numbers. For landlines are certain bank of phone numbers. So there's only a certain bank of phone numbers that are allowed. But we work with you on getting the phone numbers. We can get the phone numbers for you, however many that you need, and then just need to let us know where you want them to point, and then we'll point them to wherever necessary. And we've worked, before we ventured into doing the call tracking, the call recording, there are obviously other companies out there besides LogMyCalls that do recording and tracking of that sort. We did a lot of extensive research on some of these companies out there, and from the research that we did before we ventured into call tracking, which we've done now since last year, we did a lot of research, and we decided to partner with LogMyCalls because of their metrics that they have and their customer service and how they've worked with us. We're very pleased to partner with LogMyCalls. We found that they are one of the better ones in the business, the way their reports work that they have. You have our reports, but you also have their reports as well. So we like their reports. We like the speed of how quickly their reports generate. We like the type of reports that they have. They're very, very easy to use. So like I said, we did a lot of research before we partnered with somebody when we partnered with LogMyCalls.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Good. And then we have one more question here. Let me see. Just making sure I don't miss any. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions about specific states, about call recording, Pennsylvania, Maryland. We'll get that to you guys. And as I said, please know that there's no states in which call recording is illegal. There's some states where you just have to play the little thing, play the little message before the call. So some people are saying, well, is call recording legal in this state? Well, it's legal in every state. You just, in some states, you have to play the little disclaimer. In other states, you don't. And then
so far, okay, let me interrupt real quick. So far, we do have and everybody that's participating in the Engage program, the call tracking program, we do have that little sentence that goes on when the call, before the call is, goes live. It says that this call may be recorded for, training purposes. So by that, you're letting the person calling that the call is being recorded. Then you have a meeting at your store and say, hey, we're going to do some call recording, and all your bases are covered.
Yep, all your bases are covered. And the thing that's funny is immediately when employees know their calls are being recorded, performance improves, period. Like even without training, performance gets better, even if they just know their calls are being recorded. And then the last question Brad asked, he says, are these actually live calls? And yes, the answer is yes. So you'll actually be able to log in, go to this listen area, and hear your actual customers talk to actual employees about actual tires. And that's pretty cool stuff, honestly. It's actually kind of addicting. You could sit there and listen to calls and get a lot of good data. So
oh, you can. Once you start listening to calls, you say, oh, this was a good call. Oh, this was, I got to talk to this guy. This is bad, But you can. It's very interesting to hear the calls. And yes, they are live calls. They're actual calls from people picking up the phone. It's not mystery shopper. It's not canned phone calls. It's actual dollars that you can assign to each phone call if you get that sale or not, if you get that appointment or not.
That's right. And the last point I'll make, and I know that Scott and Jerry would say this too, ultimately, we want you to improve your marketing tactically as well as with the data. And so, you don't need to, I guess the way I'll put it is this. You could certainly get by without using call tracking. People are in business and don't use it. But you will have much more efficient marketing spend if you use call tracking than if you don't. So that's from data, from case studies, from the industry. So anyway, with that, unless there's any other questions, and thanks for your questions, everybody. We really appreciate it. With no other questions, we'll conclude. This recording, the webinar itself, will be made available to you. You'll receive an email about it tomorrow. And then I think that Jerry and Scott, some of you specifically requested phone calls and information. I'll get that info to them about who you folks are, and I'll make sure they get on the phone and get those calls done so you can get more information, because we want as many people as possible to sign up for call tracking through KeyMotive. So anyway, with that, guys, anything else to add before we conclude?
No, I want to thank you, McKay. Yeah. And thanks, everyone, for joining in and listening to our little webinar here on call tracking. Hopefully we can help you guys out and increase your bottom line, increase your appointments from the calls that come through. So, yeah, Scott, go ahead. But, again, thanks, everyone, and thanks, McKay.
Yeah, thanks again. Let's go sell some tires.
Let's do it. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.